Thank you very much, Dr. Sang-Kyun for your presentation. Now, I would like to invite the floor to ask a question. Yes?
In the conflict of I know you were referring to low cost of employing scientists in China. It's not just a cost factor, it's also a volume factor. You go to any university department, there's a computer science, there are 1,000 graduates doing anyone here. And that's very difficult for Europe to match. Even if their cost structure changes and they become more expensive, the sheer volume is something that cannot be reproduced in any one European country. Just a remark. I don't expect you to. I know you've done your part by producing 3 daughters, but much more needs to be done. The other one is to when I say Intercity Hotel, I see this big building with Donga Ventures, right? I've always wondered what kind of companies do they invest in. A venture capital company on top of this tall building, it's spelled DONGA, Ventures. Yeah. Yeah. So I would like to understand where do they invest? What kind of companies do they invest?
I don't know exactly, but there's so many small ventures are there, I think.
Yeah, I don't agree with you, but there are maybe so many venture capital associations.
Donga building, yes.
Donga is same age. Same age. So same capacity, venture capitals get together and they exchange their ideas and share each other.
Yes. Go ahead.
First I have to stand on. Okay. No, you are right. And on one of my slides, I guess in the final slide, there was one bottom line that not only aging population, but fewer young people. I guess that is the point. But when years ago, when German enterprises went abroad, that was the main factor was the labor cost. But now we are facing another challenge, I guess. I agree with you.
Yes, Malcolm.
Thank you. There's a question really to Professor Ferguson. It's about the 3 models that you described of statist, laissez-faire and balanced. Can you have Can you have 2 of those at the same time? For example, would you say that you have in the discussion, in the description by Professor about the Chungnam incubation program, would you see that as statist because it covers the state is funding the university to a degree and business? That's one model. Can you apply both in the same?
I think so, because what I was trying to give is a very broad sweep in terms of sort of looking at the different dynamics, but within a particular country or region, for example, one might see elements of a mix of these. So I didn't mean to make it seem to be so separate in that way. So I think some kind of mixed model, as we just described, is one that can exist within a region or within a nation.
Yes, Omar.
Thank you very much. My name is Umar from Nigeria. I want the lady and the Chunam University to comment on this. What's your experience in the diaspora coming back to enhance innovation? Because in Germany and the United States, these are the sources of diaspora. Whereas in Colombia and Korea, probably you get a lot of returnees, high intellectuals coming into the universities, the research institutions, and how is that enhancing innovation? Secondly, I want to ask Professor Beck, and most of my questions normally. The whole notion of developing countries is that certain things are not happening for progress. And that's literally, if you find the secrets through innovation, for certain things to start happening, people are eating good food, roads are good, electricity is available, then you will start entering emerging economies and probably will become developed. So literally, in developing countries, there are jobs there. That's why the underdevelopment is there. Also, I think every country has universities and research institutes. I think the countries that I know in developing countries. And the reason for establishing universities and research institutes is to produce human capital to do these good things to make sure that countries develop. So here you have, on one side, the production side. On the other side is the demand side. In your experience, particularly Prof, because you've done a lot of research probably in this, the cultural thing, what's your comment you think is happening in developing countries? Yes,
Ask question to everybody.
The issue, one of the issues that I try to make a point is that the cultural context and what is feasible needs to be understood within a particular country, region, or whatever. And so I think the idea of transferring innovation models, then one has to be very careful about that. That is, because what are we transferring? Case studies in innovation are pretty weak from a methodological point of view. That is, if we were to say, how do we try to understand something from a scientific or methodological point of view, much of our information about case studies and innovation is pretty weak from a methodological. So we have sort of idea that there seems to be some correlation between what is going on here and the innovation of a particular country. I think it's pretty weak methodological. I might get objections to this, but anyway, I'll say that. I think it's pretty weak from a methodological point of view. Not to say that we aren't learning some things from cases, but it's not the kind of way that we would approach most science issues. I'm not aware of many case studies that would hold up to ethnographic sort of requirements of cases. So we're dealing with fairly weak arguments from the point of view of case study. So given that, my sense is that one needs to take a much more careful look at context. So if you're talking about a developing country, I think we need to look much more carefully into what are the intellectuals, I talked about sort of soft infrastructure. What's the nature of capabilities within various contexts? And what does innovation mean in that particular context? I don't have answers to this, but I would be interested, for example, some of our PhD people, for example, I think ought to be looking into various areas of the world and trying to understand more about the intellectual capital, the problems, the issues, etc., and raise questions about what kind of innovation models might be more reasonable first steps in innovation for various areas. That's just the kind of point that I'm making. I have no great insights into that because I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the conditions within various areas to suggest to you this model or that model would be a reasonable route within the context. I take as some examples of this that even the diversity within the U.S., if one looks at various areas of the country, one gets great disparities in terms of economic development. And those issues are rather complex from the point of view of trying to understand what would be necessary to spur the economy within certain regions, for example. Sorry that I don't have, do this, do that kind of answer.
You've answered it well.
Okay.
in a way of provoking me, as normally. I'm not in the position to give advice to you, so I really refrain from that. But just say some minor comments. The status that Germany has reached is the end of a long process that started 150 years ago. And if you look at the main ingredients of that, say of the economic success, for example, there is a well-trained workforce. There's a kind of stable and extended educational system. All these are main ingredients. And by whatever reason, this is lacking in many African countries. And yesterday you gave a book to 3 persons, and the title was something, Why Running Before Walking, or something like that. I found this is really a wonderful question, because it really puts the emphasis on, say, on the speed of development, but also the order of developmental, say, steps. And sometimes I have the feeling, what I have seen in Africa, you all want to run or to fly before walking. And that was not the order, so we followed in Germany. So we were walking, so in a normal pace. But of course, nowadays, the problem I see in a developed country, you have to do many things in parallel. You cannot say walk slowly and get to the next steps. You are in a competition and you have something. But you should, no, I refrain from saying should, yes. Why not thinking about, say building up workforce, say have a good educational system, and so which economic activities you should pursue should be a main issue of consideration. So don't fly. So I don't feel that it will work. So these are comments from a friend to a friend. Nothing more.
I just wanted to comment that even the issue of building a successful education system can be an issue demanding a high level of innovation.
Yeah, well, first I want to stress something. Maybe Jocelyn thought I was being too negative, but in fact, I just want to stress. If you look at what is called, I don't know the formal name, but something like the happiness index, Colombia is always way high out on that. Okay, and the economy has been growing, as I showed. Unfortunately, just very focused on these areas that are not based on high science and technology fields. Okay, but the fact of the 2008 economic downfall in the rest of the world, Colombia was not affected, and that was very positive in the sense of what you were asking. So a lot of people, Colombians came back, but a lot of foreigners started to look for jobs in Colombia, well-trained, highly trained people, and this in fact does allow you to, let's say, cut corners or to advance faster in many aspects. Just this year, for example, at my institution, we were able to hire a Colombian that had worked at one of the most advanced companies that try to work with innovation in the Basque country. And he came now, and he's the head of the TTO office. So with him, what we're seeing inside the university is radically different from what we had before, just because we have a much more qualified person.
I don't have
So, in fact, there is a similarity between Colombia and Korea. It's very, very creative country. If Korea famous with C, this Gangnam style, Colombia is very famous with Shakira.
Yes, she was in my picture. You didn't see her, but she was there.
And then, I think that the book, which is very, very interesting to see all of the perspective of evaluation of the development of science, technology, and innovation. It is written by Professor Daejeon from HEIs. You can find it in the KeyStep website. You can download it for free. And then you can see the evolution of the Korean science, technology, innovation policy since the 60s. So how Korea, from the simple thing, in the 60s, the first they developed this Korean Institute for Science and Technology. And then in the institute, there is the Science and Technology Committee for Science Policy. It's very simple, it's very small institute, which is evolved after becoming STEPI, and then STEPI get listed. And then during this committee, they just collect the very, very basic information. How many engineers and how many scientists that they have, and then how to use these scientists to help the industry. It is the first, it is very, very innovative. Then to link between industry and research activities. So I suggest you to go to the KeyStep website and download it. Yes, I think this last question. Yes.
Okay. Can I get this on? Yeah, thank you. I would like to come back to the role of young people for the innovation process. And every time I'm in Korea, I learn a lot of new things, and I didn't know that this is such a severe problem. Also, Professor Becker mentioned that we have in Germany the problem that the fertility rate is quite very low, 1.3, and therefore potentially a lack in innovation potential in future. But if we compare our German figures with Swedish figures, and the birth rate in Sweden is much higher, then we see the point that in Sweden the unemployment rate among young people is much higher than in Germany, even higher than here in Korea. But as we learned in the lecture from Professor Becker, the Swedish innovation index is higher than in Germany. So probably there are some other factors behind this. And my question, just to Professor Becker, also to Professor Young, is could that also be a question of brain drain? That is not necessarily the point how much young people you have, but more important, and what is with the most talented people in the country? Will they remain in Germany or in Korea, or will they move to USA or to Switzerland or to Sweden or to other countries? And isn't that the main problem for the future sustainable, also the future sustainability of the innovation system?
May I add some more things?
No, we don't have time anymore.
Instead of me, you can say. Okay.
Oh, you want to answer to the question?
Yeah,
I
yes.
want to add some more things.
Yeah, we have time now. It's just talking break.
Ask question or ask to give the answer?
So your slide was just a coffee break. We can cut the coffee break.
Okay, I guess in case of Germany, you do not have enough young generation. But look at the Sweden, right? They pure young generation, young people in Germany, but creative, okay, the index of creativity is higher in Germany. Then I can guess the innovation process do not need so many people. Just a few people who have high capacity can innovate whole society as a whole. So one of the strategies of fostering young generation innovation is fostering a high talented people with big push. Then you can get answer. Is that not another additional idea about this?
Yes, Professor Becker.
Oh, that's nice because the colleague is from my university, so that is a university internal, say, dispute, and also you had it. First of all, these innovation ranking, so it depends on some indicator. And I can give you another ranking that was made by a German foundation, different results. So I guess specific ranking does not answer all questions. So that first of all. And secondly, you are right. The innovation needs, say, a few bright minds. So if you look at what happens in Silicon Valley and so on, you need 10 gifted people and then they change the world. But of course, the probability of finding these bright minds is also a statistical phenomenon. So if you have 100 people, then the chance of finding the bright is higher than this. And the Swedish situation and the Finnish, and also, I guess, what you said yesterday in one discussion. So the Swedish and Finnish and Danish population, they are about 5 million people or something like that. So there's also say, some impact of, say, smaller population we are dealing with. But I agree with the following, say, observation. It's not just, say, a matter of the number of young people. It's more, say, the spirit, and that's really, say, complies with what President Jung said, the spirit which they have, or which they get, say, have access to. It's funny, 2-3 weeks ago, a colleague of Professor Daejeon, Burton Lee from Stanford, gave a talk at my university, and he compared the entrepreneurship attitude among young people in Germany to that in the United States and California or Stanford. And that is in fact like Korea. The young German people tend to, say, go to secure, safe job situation. That's like Korea. So also they don't mind becoming a teacher or, say, civil servant. They don't mind. It's a good life. So then the happiness index will get up. And the question of failure, that is like a social stigma. That's also true in Germany. And in Germany, if you look, that was, I guess, in your slide, so the entrepreneurship among young people, I guess, wasn't yours. See, Germany is below the average, because people do not dare to start risky activities. That's a problem. And if you go to the, say to Silicon Valley, so people that drop out of the university system, maybe at a middle level, they are successful entrepreneurs. In Germany, this is, say, a person that is considered, say, a failing person. So if you drop out at the middle level of the university, you are nothing. But people, the entrepreneur in the United States, they were of this type. Not all of them, but some of them. And that is one of the biggest differences. So we have to change this kind of attitude, hostility against risky activities, but also the chance to find these people that are willing to start risky activities, say the probability is much higher, let me say, or it's a chance to find those people, that you need enough young people, yes. So that is, it's more precise. So we can continue the discussion with my German colleagues.
Thank you very much. So with this answer from Professor Becker, we complete our session. And then we'll be back here at 4 o'clock. And then thanks all of the speakers for their contribution, very valuable contribution.